Hey guys, there were some questions around developing muscle size, the kind of calories required for it, training with aerobic training and the kind of calories needed on those days. It's interesting if we there's in fitness there's two things that we're after, and generally it's we want to build either more lean muscle tissue, or we conversely want to have less body fat on the body, and generally we want both. The inherent challenge with that is that it's kind of in conflict with itself because the rules around weight loss or fat loss more specifically is that we need more energy going out than coming in to sustain a negative calorie balance to bring down ideally to force the body to utilize existing fuel stores to bring your body fat levels down. That's the goal. Of course, building muscle tissue requires a positive calorie balance, not a negative one. So we need more calories coming in than going out to initiate and sustain a positive calorie balance. So I actually have enough raw material to build muscle and tendons and ligaments and what have you, right? So they're kind of in conflict, right? So we want to lose fat and build muscle. So how do we do that? Well, when we look on our training days, and on our weight training days more specifically, is that now these are days where we need to be in a positive calorie balance, meaning that we can't be really restrictive on our strength training days. Now we're not sitting at the buffet with a lobster bib and a knife and fork screaming, get the hell out of my way. But we are focusing on not overly restricting our calories, making sure that we're eating approximately every 3 hours throughout the day, a good combination of protein, carbohydrates, and healthy carbohydrates, more in the form of crunchy leafy vegetables. Except when we look at around training, pre and post training, of course, we talk about that carb bracketing, where we have, and more specifically starch bracketing, where we use the starchy carbohydrate pre-training and post-training. One, to provide fuel for the workout, and two, to provide fuel to restore the energy that I just used up. So we've got to be careful about being too restrictive on our calories on our weight training days, because we need the energy coming in from the carbohydrates, from the fats, and from the protein to provide energy for the metabolism, to provide protein as a raw material for enzymes and for muscle tissue and for all the other cell structures that we have in the human body. So we almost get a bit of a spike on our weight training days as far as our calories. And then when it comes to our cardiovascular training days, we can actually back off the starch content. In fact, on what I recommend, for some clients, is that we actually pull all the starch out for the most part, and maybe except for breakfast on the non-weight training days. So by pulling the starch out on the non-weight training days, quite often what ends up happening is we find the caloric content also comes down at the same time. Because aerobic training is predominantly, well, with oxygen, hence the name aerobic, right, means with oxygen. Because aerobic training requires less in the form of blood sugar, exclusively blood sugar. It'll use a little bit of blood sugar, use a little bit of blood glucose, but also we utilize oxygen and fat as I get more into the aerobic capacity of my training. So my body will kind of switch gears as far as the fuel sources. So when you're trying to build muscle tissue, yes, it's not so much that should you do less cardio, is that are you eating enough calories to support everything that you're doing? And that really becomes part of the issue. So one thing I always get people to look at before we do anything is go through and plug your calories into MyFitnessPal, right? So www.myfitnesspal.com, and actually plug in your calories and see what you're eating over a course of 2 or 3 days. Now, if the end objective is to build more muscle tissue, and you want to build more muscle, if you're a little more petite and find it hard to put on weight, then you're going to have to look at that component and see where your existing calories sit for one, and then making one adjustment. And we generally recommend, if your protein levels are low, let's say you're sitting around 85 grams of protein for the whole day, I would have that before 10 a.m. Right, so I'm a 217-pound athlete. I would consume sometimes up to 300 grams of protein a day, most of it from organic whey, because it's just easier on my body. And my body, the bioavailability of organic whey is much greater than most. So, but that's just for me, and that's because I'm in a building phase, of course, of my training. So for the average female, and this is really kind of it's just a stereotypical thing to throw out there, but we have to plot something on the graph. Let's say for the average female, you'd want to be consuming about 100 to 125 grams of protein per day, 7 days a week on average. So let's see, so if you're trying to build muscle mass, first of all, look at your total calories, right? See where your total calories are sitting. And ideally, as a mean, as an average, right? Again, I hate it, but we need to plot the graph somewhere. If we're sitting at 1,400 calories on average, that should be a good baseline just to build from. right? Probably no less, but certainly we can go look at going a lot more. And in those 1,400 calories, are you consuming, enough protein? Is there enough? Is there about 100 grams to 125 grams of protein in your diet? If not, the first rule of thumb, of course, is let's bring that up first. Let's bring those calories up first, and bring that protein level up first, and sustain that over the course of the next 2 weeks. And what we're looking for, of course, is the body to recognize the increase in protein. There's things called chemoreceptors in the body, of course, the little receptors that recognize the change in chemistry, and food is simply chemistry. So when we chew something up, we eat it down, the brain goes, hey, the 25 extra grams of protein just dropped into the gut. What's that? It's an anomaly. Don't worry about it. She's never that consistent. And so it doesn't believe you, right? So after 4 or 5 days, the stomach keeps going, honestly, this stuff is still showing up. What the hell are we going to do with it? Right now we're just turning to methane. She's scared to bend over and tie her shoes, or she's going to blow a gasket. So the body doesn't believe you in the beginning. We have to stimulate it to utilize the new quantity of protein. Like try dropping 100 grams of protein in your diet when you're let's say when you're sitting at 25 or 30 grams. You'll be a methane producing machine. Your bodies can't deal with it. So we slowly introduce new things into the body, like exercise. We introduce the more protein in the diet and keep it there over the course of a couple of weeks, a week to 2 weeks, and see what your body's going to do with it. If you find there's an increase in strength and an increase in vitality, and you feel good, and muscle soreness is going away, and you actually feel like you're making some progress, then we're on the right track. And we may need to, of course, even bring that up a little bit more as we go through, as your body becomes accustomed to it. Conversely, if you feel bloated and you feel really yucky and your belly's kind of bothering you, then that wasn't the thing, right? So we may look at bringing up dietary fats and bring those up a little bit in your diet because we're just guessing. This is an educated guess. So we're playing around with these variables. But I think again, just to sum it up, 1,400 calories should be the good mean for you. If you're trying to build muscle, you can't be any lower than that, I'm pretty sure. And then make sure your protein's sitting about 100 to 125 grams, 7 days a week, right? And spread over, of course, your 4 to 5 meals, however you set that up. And then on your aerobic training, for people that are really trying to maximize fat loss, just minimize, of course, the starchy carbohydrate on your aerobic days. Again, you can have it at breakfast time, but really try to minimize it throughout the rest of the day and making sure you're eating adequate calories. And as we have talked about before, when you notice that there's more healthy fats mentioned in the meals post training, your snacks and your lunch and your dinners, what have you, is that we still need the energy to run on. So we can't have any less calories, but we're actually choosing where those calories are coming from. So if I still have, let's say, for example, I'm still having 1,400 calories on my aerobic days, but the calories now coming more from fat and protein, less from the actual sugars. I don't spike my blood sugar. I have enough energy to train on. I feel satiated. I have enough calories to run on. And again, we're athletes, right? This is not a diet, right? You're training hard. You can't diet while training hard. You can have eating strategies to support the level of activity, but if you're on a diet mentality, it's not going to end well, I guarantee it. So for those of you that use some of the different Isagenix products, and again, Diana, I think you were asking about that. When you're looking at, most of them are very low glycemic. So I use about 5 of these a day, anywhere from 3 to 5 a day. And this is Isoline Pro. It's a very low glycemic. So again, I would use that. I would consider most of the products, except for the bars, the shakes have a lower glycemic load than a lower sugar response. The shakes have a lower sugar response than the bars. The only bar in there that I would say that has a really well-controlled sugar content, they're all healthy and they're all great, would be the cashew. The cashew bar has a bit of a higher fat content because the cashew, so really it's better glycemically balanced. I could have that on an aerobic day, but not the other bars. I would stick mainly with the meal replacements, the Isoline Pro or the Isoline Shake. And again, the reason, I know not everybody is a big proponent of using meal replacements. The reason why I utilize them, and this is just a really simple example. Imagine that I'm $1 million in debt, right? And I don't have a job. And so somebody offers me a job at Tim Hortons paying out at, let's say, for example, $8 an hour, 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I got some cash coming in, right? So I'm bankrupt, $1 million in debt, but I got some cash coming in. So what is my $7 an hour, Tim Hortons job going to do to $1 million in debt? Nothing at all. Actually, it's almost an insult because the bank's going to say your piddly $7 an hour or $8 an hour is useless. It's not going to work. We're still going to bankrupt you. So when we look at our dietary strategies, if I've been unhealthy or if I've been in a nutritional deficit for some time, and then I decide I'm going to start eating healthy all of a sudden, eating healthy plus engaging in a relatively rigorous regime like this exercise program that you find yourself in. Eating healthy after not eating healthy for such a long period of time, having an extended amount of time being unhealthy, my eating healthy actually is a good thing and it's a positive thing. It may not be enough of a thing. So because our nutritional profile has been so low for so long, we built an entire physiology off poor nutrition, right? For a long period of time. Consider how long you've been in that place, how long you've eaten poorly. So, so it's not a condemnation, it's just a reality that, it's just that we built our body on whatever we were doing, right? Whatever the resources we had, the education we had, that's the reality of it. So I use supplementation because that $1 million in debt, I want to get rid of it. And not only do I have to support the daily stress of training and just being in life in general, right? High levels of stress, lots of uncertainty in life, training hard, you name it. Plus, there's so much scientific evidence, and of course, it's a non-issue or a non-question anymore about the quality of our food, which is slim and none. I mean, there's no question about that. All the scientific literature points to the fact that food, well, it's just not food anymore. So nutritional supplementation fills in the gaps, and that's why I use it on a daily basis. And the only reason why I can sustain the level of health that I have, put on the level of muscle mass, stay as lean as I do, it's not because of how hard I train. Training is a stimulus. Training is a stressor. It's how well I recover. If I'm not recovering, I'm not changing. I'm not going to burn off fat very effectively if the exercise I'm doing, it just becomes one more stressor, and my nutrition is inadequate to meet the demands of my life before exercise, let alone my life with all this exercise. So that's why I use meal replacements. And again, and it's not a plug for Isagenix, it's just the stuff that I found. I've been using products for 20 some years, and it works really well for me. So you may find things that work for you that really work well. Then by all means, if it's working for you, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But that's just the rationale behind supplementation. And again, especially when trying to build muscle tissue, I find, like, I'm 217 pounds. I put on since I was 47, so I'll be 51 in July. I put on almost 14 pounds of lean muscle naturally, not just from training, but actually from recovering effectively. So nutrition is a big deal. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. I know it kind of got a little long-winded there, but take my advice for all it's worth, and I hope it helped out somewhat.